In the meantime, while we're waiting for a few people to stream in, let's get everybody to answer in the chat. So where are you joining us from today, and what is your team's biggest learning engagement challenge? Definitely worth reflecting, because everything we're going to be talking today, I want you to apply to some project that you're working on. Otherwise, it's not that useful, not as useful as it could be. Just a little bit about Hone before we get started. For those of you who aren't familiar, Hone is a live learning platform. We have the world's largest catalog of live virtual classes. Our classes on people leadership skills, from coaching to change management to psychological safety, are led by a really incredible group of world-class coaches and facilitators. And we have an all-in-one live learning platform which powers training programs at enterprises like ServiceNow, Dow Jones, Aramark, and many others. We're going to be recording this session, but any sensitive information will be edited out of the recording. As we'll see in a moment, there's going to be a lot of participation expected, and I think you'll get more out of it when you participate. So feel free to participate, talk about whatever specific challenges you have, and we'll make sure to actually cut that out of the recording. A little bit about me. So my name is Alex. I'm the principal learning experience designer at Hone. I have 15 years, more than that, of experience in learning technology. I'm obsessed with AI. I'm merely passionate about philosophy and behavioral science. I'll try to make this the 1 hour of the day when I don't talk about AI. This includes annoying the crap out of my wife in the evening. So I'll try to keep it just to learner engagement. We'll see what happens. I've had trouble with this. Originally, I'm from Belarus. As I mentioned, I grew up in New York City and live in New Jersey with my wife. We have a 2-year-old and we have a 10-week-old. So I've been sleeping too much, but I'll do my best today. I just want to also take a moment to plug our podcast, new podcast called Learning Works. Recently, we had on Cindy Huggett, who's a pioneer of live virtual training, and she told us about an engagement exercise that I'm going to try with everybody right now. On a scale of 1 to 5, how engaged do you plan on being in the learning today? You can answer in the chat, or let me see by you can show numbers with your hands. We got some 5s. No judgment. No judgment. If it's a 1, honestly, and you're like, you came in here and you knew you were going to be eating lunch, okay, great. And now here's the real question. This is devious. What would it take to increase that number by 1? So you can answer in the chat or really reflect. Yeah, shut off my incoming work stream. So you can start to really think about, okay, what's probably going to distract me in the next hour, and how do I deal with that right now? In the full version of this, you would actually have a conversation. You spend a few minutes. We only have an hour today. We're going to zoom past this, but this is probably the best engagement tip I've learned this month, and that's pretty good. But I've been at Hone for 4 years, and in those 4 years, I've learned 3 very important things. So right off the bat, I'm going to give you something good, which is the first thing that I've learned in 4 years is that live virtual classes work really well. And I'm biased, right? I work at Hone. We sell live virtual classes. How much more biased can I possibly be? But I've been in ed tech for about 17 years, and I spent 7 years making videos, and I now wish I had spent those 7 years making live virtual classes instead. And here's why. So live virtual classes are highly engaging and effective if they're done right. So for example, at Hone, we have a plus 68 NPS, which is very high for L&D related things. And we have very high ratings for individual sessions. So 4.7 out of 5, people like the experience. And people also go through it. They complete it. They attend and they actually complete the experience. So 84% of learners actually complete the program, and typically programs are like 4 60-minute classes. And then there's some effectiveness to it. We have a behavioral assessment after every program, and 91% of learners exhibit performance improvement in at least one skill or more. And that's as assessed by their colleagues, so not self-assessed. And when we first started, our numbers were not this good. It took a lot of trial and error, but slowly things panned out. And the reason our approach to live virtual worked is the second biggest lesson I've learned at Hone, which is that people love talking about themselves. So I came to learn this because people kept telling me how much they love the breakout rooms, but there's actual science to this. Talking about ourselves triggers similar feelings of pleasure in similar parts of the brain as eating good food does. And so not only do people love talking about themselves, but if you have people do that as part of a guided discussion that aligns with your learning objectives, that's a really helpful and effective thing to have people to do. One thing I'll say is that I should qualify this statement. People love talking about themselves, except for the people who don't. But what we find is that people who don't like it, they don't really complain, and they still go through the experience. They still get the benefits of articulating their thoughts with their colleagues. Only one person in the many thousands of learners that we've trained has ever insisted that he doesn't want to do breakout rooms. And actually, even he only didn't like the role plays, but he liked other kinds of breakout rooms. Live virtual classes with breakout rooms where people get to talk about themselves have been a really important engagement boosters for us. The third most important thing that I've realized, and this has been a tendency that I need to cut against for myself, which is that every experience needs to be about one thing, even if it's about 10 things. So meaning always teach to a model or a framework. And I'm going to practice what I preach here and show you this. So this is the model or framework I want you to think about for today's session. It's called the Learning Transfer Evaluation Model. It's created by L&D legend and Hohn's good buddy, Dr. Will Thalheimer. I think this is a vast improvement over, for example, the Kirkpatrick scale, in that it lays out in more detail what you're actually looking for from attendance all the way down to transfer and effects of transfer. And what we're focusing on today is these first three tiers. So attendance, activity, and learner perceptions. This is pretty exhaustive of engagement, okay? And another model I want you to think about is something that we call the learning engagement cascade. So we believe learning should be a cascade that starts with some kind of live virtual experience, not necessarily virtual, but some kind of live experience first. And so we have a live class, and then that lets you take the plunge. This is a very durable kayak, so don't worry. So live class might be followed by practice, capstone projects, some kind of nudges that lead to some kind of just-in-time performance support that may be tied to some self-paced learning and reinforcement, which then eventually leads somebody to re-enter another experience. Why does this make sense? So this is a slide. I hate showing slides with lots of bullet points. Don't even read this, honestly. You can read this later. I think it's in your learner guide, which I'll share in a moment. But there's a unique value to learning experiences, and at least one of these benefits listed here is going to apply to any program you create. And there are things you can do live that you just can't do in e-learning, let's say. Like you can't give people feedback in a safe, simulated environment, really. You can't enable collaborative learning and help people create human connection and so forth. So there are all these values of a live experience. And even if no one learns anything from the live experience, which is unlikely, but at least some people are going to come away with they were overwhelmed or they were distracted. They may leave that live experience inspired or motivated or committed to engage with all of the other experiences that you have that will continue to help them to continue to grow their skills. So if you have a bunch of e-learning that you want people to engage with or some performance support or whatever, having some kind of live experience at the top that basically serves to say, hey, we have these really awesome resources for you. Here's why they're going to be really valuable for you. And here's why you should engage with them. That's better as a live experience than just sending somebody an email. Okay. So here's our agenda for today. This is going to be still interactive, less interactive than our typical class, but I will try to continue to practice what we preach. In today's session, we're going to cover first 5 tactics for boosting attendance and completion of your programs, then 5 tactics for boosting participation within each learning experience, and then how to measure engagement beyond learner satisfaction. And really what we're talking about is how do we get these first 3 levels right? Because if we want to get to knowledge and decision-making competence and transfer and all these amazing things, we need people to attend first. We need them to participate and exhibit activity. And then we need to understand their perceptions so that we can transfer that energy into other things that look like application and behavior change and performance improvement and all the other stuff that we actually want. Okay, so let's kick it off. We're going to start with attendance. So how do we boost attendance? Let's reflect for a moment on another kind of example. If a Hollywood studio makes a movie for $50 million, how much would you expect it to spend on marketing? Let's have everyone answer in the chat. What's your best guess? So the amount studios spend on teaser trailers, movie websites, billboards, TV ads, and any other promotional materials is typically 50 to 150% of the budget production. So if you guessed anywhere between 25 and 75 million, you're probably right. Depends on the movie. Barbie, I think, cost $150 to make, and they spent $150 on marketing, and they have blasted past that and have over $1 billion in worldwide earnings. But that's really typical. What's not typical about Barbie is that it was very expensive to make, but in general, this is what the industry does. Can you say the same about training and learning programs you offer? Right? You're not a Hollywood producer, but a lot of the same incentives apply, right? You have an audience. You want your audience to engage with your programs. And if your programs have some expected positive value, the more people who go through it, the more value you deliver, the bigger the impact, the higher the ROI, the better you look. And if people don't go through your programs, then you have some explaining to do. It feels terrible and you have to spin it in some way. So how do we avoid spinning? How do we get people to attend at the top? Because if we don't get attendance at the top, we're not going to get any of the other things. And one way to appreciate the outsized importance of attendance is to think about the extent to which your impact is a product of effectiveness and scale. So for example, let's say you have a program that's highly effective. It's a 4 out of 5, whatever that means to you. And it's a 4 out of 5 in terms of actual effectiveness. And it really gets people to change their behavior. And let's say 10 people complete that program. Now compare that to a program with effectiveness 2 out of 5, but 100 people complete it. If you multiply those numbers out, that's 5 times the impact with a learning experience that is half as good. So scale is what really wins the day here, because it's really hard to make something even twice as effective, let alone 3 times. It's much easier to get twice as many people to do something, or 3 times as many people. So with that said, let's review the 5 tactics that we found to be most effective for boosting attendance. The first of which is what we call forced enrollment. So in most organizations, people are really busy, or they say they're busy, stuff comes up all the time. So just putting a class on somebody's calendar may be a good idea. We call this forced enrollment. It's a lot nicer than it sounds, especially when you have flexibility built in. So there's higher motivation to attend because it magically appears on your calendar and it's been assigned by some part of the organization. But there's probably some more likelihood that some people may have a conflict, or the time that you assign them may be inconvenient. So if you have some flexibility built in, so you allow for people to switch to different cohorts or different sessions, maybe you give some makeup options and so on, then you are likely to get what a lot of our customers get, which is over 90% attendance in a lot of cases and program completion. Another approach that we take, a second option, which we've also seen be really successful, is to create a bunch of slots and invite people to sign up for the ones that they feel best fits their schedule. We call this open enrollment. And with it, there's lower motivation to attend because you have to go through the sign up process. Maybe people don't want to click a bunch of buttons to sign up, but there's also a lower likelihood of having conflicts or inconveniences. So we address this by making enrollment as easy as possible. And in general, we help admins who choose this option to remind their people, to nudge their people that they can choose whichever class they want, but they are highly advised to choose at least one. Okay. The third tactic is a kind of combination of 2 really valuable things that are better together, which is you want to get executive sponsors, but you want to specifically get them to sell the benefits of the program. So the right executive is going to capture the attention of learners and create company-wide excitement, or you might have to look at the specific audience. The right executive might change depending on who the audience is. Who's the most relevant for this learning experience? Who does the audience look up to the most, let's say? But the best thing that those executives can actually be saying about the program is, what am I going to get out of this program? How is it going to make my life easier or better? And why is it important to the company? And if an executive is making that case, again, you're going to have some natural boost of motivation to take that class. And it signals to people that executives are paying attention to the results of the program. So that's a good thing as well. Another tactic that we use on occasion is to offer a pre-assessment. This is an earlier version of our assessment. It doesn't look like this anymore, but I wanted to just show as an example an assessment that people can take that's related to whatever they're going to learn about, that allows them to maybe get some feedback and then hear maybe that people are dissatisfied with some aspect of their performance, or have them suddenly realize that they have some kind of gap in their abilities, and that would motivate them to attend the program. And you don't even need to create an assessment. You could just have a program tied to the results of, let's say you're doing a company-wide manager survey that you're going to be doing anyway. And as a result of that survey, some people are going to be like, oh man, I didn't know my team thought XYZ of me. And if you have a learning program that's tied to that, it's a very natural step that people can take. Again, another way to boost attendance. And then the last attendance booster, and the one that may have the largest impact on scale, is to launch training to multiple audiences around a shared moment of need. For example, let's say you have Q1 planning coming up. That's a perfect opportunity for everyone in the company to do some training around setting goals or setting OKRs or setting strategy, depending on their level. And doing this not only helps you vastly broaden your scale and thus your total impact, but you're also likely to create some kind of synergistic effects where ideas from like these new ideas that are percolating at all these levels are going to interact in some way, and you're going to get additional benefits just by virtue of all of these people in your organization learning basically about the same thing, just in a way that's more tailored to their level. I'm going to ask you a question in a moment. Before I do, just want to point out, each of these tactics is not perfect. They all have holes in them, but together they're pretty solid. So this is called the Swiss cheese model, and it applies. It's often used to talk about accidents. If you want to remove the possibility of an accident, you create all of these different fail safes, but this applies also to how you're rolling out a program to get people to attend. Let's continue. We're going to look at the second tier now, which is activity. And it's tempting to see this tier. So let's say we've got everybody to attend. We used our Swiss cheese model. We stacked our slices up, and we have 90% plus attendance, which is great. That gives us the opportunity to create a large total impact. And when we get to activity, when someone's actually interacting with our e-learning course or actually in the class, it's tempting to see this and say, all right, I'm going to design something with maximal interactivity, and I'm going to make sure that people have fun and are engaging in some way doing something. The problem with that is that the more fun people are having, the less they're learning. To some extent, that's true. Real learning is hard. It hurts a little bit. And so we need to be really thoughtful about the actual activities we're trying to boost. And in this section, I'd like to review the 5 tactics we found to be most effective for boosting activity, but also doing so in a way that aligns with learning objectives and gets people to, down the road, change their behavior in a way that matters to the organization and not just do something fun in a class. So the first part of this is just setting the expectation that active participation by everybody is the norm. For example, at the beginning of every hone class, we have our house agreements, which are, among other things, to keep your video on and to be an active participant. And with very few exceptions, just about every learner in every organization agrees to do this, even though there may be an organizational culture to lurk in the meeting with your video off on mute, eating a sandwich. That might be fine for some meetings, but in a learning experience is not a meeting. And setting the expectation and being pretty firm about it and seeing that everybody else is doing it is really valuable. That's another way of actually ensuring attendance. So just because someone shows up to the class, or just because someone shows up to clicks the link in the e-learning, as somebody mentioned, it doesn't mean that they're going to like actually participate in any way. They might just skip ahead to the question. So we want them, this is another way of guaranteeing some kind of scale, right? So we want people to be focused and attentive and not multitasking. And once we have people's expectation that they're going to be participating, there are a few different things that you can have them do that we found to be really effective. One tactic is to have people brainstorm individually and then discuss as a group. So the question might be, based on what we've learned today, how might we apply it to our team this quarter? And you can send people off to a Figma board or a Jamboard or a Miro board. There are lots of different tools. I think Jamboard is free and is something that Google has. We like to use Figma. And then you bring people together to discuss. And when people brainstorm aloud as a group, it's easy to want to state your idea and then start defending it. Like, oh, I think we should do this because X, Y, Z. But if you can quietly see other people's better ideas or better articulations of your own ideas, you can +1 them and be a part of the winning coalition, which feels really good. Sometimes it feels better than having everybody hear your idea and say how smart you are for your unique idea. Likewise, if you have people brainstorm in a breakout room and come up with ideas, it's easy for one or two people to dominate the conversation. So having people split off for a few minutes, do some individual work, and then discussing as a group is really effective. And normally you wouldn't think about this as a learning tactic, but again, it makes sense for certain kinds of activities. So based on what we've learned today, how might we apply this? That's probably a good use of time. The next tactic is to get coaches specifically to lead high impact group exercises. So all the facilitators at home are certified coaches, and that enables us to do things like have leadership teams assess their psychological safety, and the resulting conversations are not necessarily easy. Like when you have a bunch of leaders get together and assess the psychological safety of their group, there might be some difficult conversations that come out of that, but they're extremely valuable. And if you have an effective coach there who can help guide the conversation, ask questions, address blockers or challenges as they come up and so on, that's going to be really valuable. And your typical facilitator who's used to presenting or like guiding exercises is not going to be best equipped for that kind of high impact activity that might get into some sensitive stuff, but is still really valuable specifically because it gets into things that really matter that people might not actually talk about outside of the context you're presenting to them. Another really valuable tactic is to facilitate independent practice, or even better, get people to do actual work. So generally, no more than 5 minutes at a time, meaning right now you're going to do, and we're going to do this together, actually. I'm going to have you do an exercise later on for 4 or 5 minutes. You're going to go into your workbook and you're going to do some work. And if you spend more than 10 minutes doing it, generally people start to lose their momentum and they start checking their emails or something. So 10 minutes might be the max that you would allow for individual work at a given time. But you can drive enormous value by getting people to immediately apply what they're learning to actual works. For example, in this screenshot here, this is from our class on developing differentiated strategy. And we have everybody in that class do what's called a TOES analysis. It's a more sophisticated version of a SWOT analysis that's better geared towards strategy. And people spend 10 minutes doing this, and then they discuss it with other leaders. And everybody does it versus begging people after the class to please do this. Right? You're not going to get so much uptake. But if you put it right in the middle of the live experience or in the asynchronous experience, in order to actually continue, you have to fill out this TOES analysis. You have to actually do the work. That's a great way to get people to be active in a way that very likely aligns with learning objectives and gets them to apply something valuable. The last tactic before I'd like to hear from all of you is to get people to reflect together in small groups, which is really bread and butter of a lot of what we do. It's something we're going to do in a moment. In fact, this screenshot is a screenshot of the breakout room that you're all going to be doing at the end of today's session. Typically, if a home class is an hour long, 25 to 30 minutes of that is taken up by breakout rooms followed by debriefs. And a breakout can be totally useless if you're just getting people to chat about whatever it is. But if you're having them reflect together on a prompt that's related to what they're learning about, or giving and receiving feedback to each other. So they just did some individual work. Now you go into breakouts and you compare each other. You compare the work that you did. That's specifically what we'll be doing. Coaching people, collaborating on a task together. These are all great uses of time in breakout rooms. Generally, our breakouts are like 8 to 12 minutes long with groups of 2 or 3. Groups of 2 are great if you're talking about more sensitive information. In some of our DEIB classes, we have people stick to 2 groups because those conversations are a little bit more intimate. In other conversations, you want to have groups of 3 or 4 just to get a more diverse set of opinions about a particular challenge. And then after every breakout, we do debriefs. How did that go? What did you notice that you had in common? What are your challenges still? And so building in time for that is also really important. Yeah, Leah mentions often learning sessions don't leave enough time for self-reflection. Yeah, both individually or like after some kind of group work. One way to think about these tactics or to help make sure that you're using enough of them is if you're using slides, you can go on grid view and just look overall, where are the points of interaction? You should aim for a point of interaction every 3 to 5 minutes. If you're thinking about e-learning, like e-learning in itself is very interactive, but maybe somebody has to sit and watch like a long video, that's probably a bad idea. So I would say if you're going to be doing e-learning, probably something more like micro-learning, where you have like short videos followed by short bits of application in between each video is probably a good idea, and a way of kind of replicating that same flow that you would get in a learner experience in an asynchronous experience, a live learning experience in an asynchronous experience. The last thing I want to cover today is just a very short idea, which is that we're boosting attendance and we're boosting participation. But a lot of times when we think about perception, learner perception, which is tier 3, we just assess satisfaction level. And there is unfortunately no correlation between how satisfied somebody is with a learning experience and the likelihood that they're actually going to apply what they've learned or retain what they've learned or change their behavior as a result or something. In fact, there are reasons why there's actually an inverse relationship. Sometimes people are like, oh, I love this, but that's because it was really easy. You didn't do anything. You just had to sit there and listen to somebody, charismatic person talk, and let it wash over you. And then a few days later, everything's gone. And so we want to be careful about defining an engaged learner as a satisfied learner. We want to move more to something like thinking about engaged learners as motivated learners. So one way that you can do this and operationalize it is by potentially asking a question at the end of your program, or at the end of a given experience, or after somebody did something async or sync, doesn't matter. You can ask, for example, this kind of question. This is, again, from the work of Dr. Will Thalheimer. He has written a whole book on performance-focused smile sheets. One of the questions he asks is related to motivation to apply. And you see here on the left, there are ratings, right? So if somebody says, my current role doesn't enable me to apply what I've learned, oh, that's really bad. That's probably a huge mismatch between somebody who's there and what you're teaching. But then there are also unacceptable things where somebody went through this whole experience and they're not going to make it a priority to actually do anything about it. And what you want to aim for is creating experiences that get people to say, oh yeah, I went through this and I'm going to make it a high priority to do this in my day job. And you might find when you start asking a question like this, you're getting lots of unacceptable responses, but that's good, because if you hadn't asked it, you wouldn't have seen that, and you wouldn't have done anything about it. And so asking something like this starts getting you closer to the kind of engagement that actually leads to all of the other levels that you want: task competence, knowledge transfer, etc. One of the things that we do to help turn engagement into action is at the end of every class, we have people make a commitment. In some classes, we have an elevated version of a commitment. So based on the idea of triggered action planning, where you set a goal, then define a situation in which you will take a particular action. And these sorts of very specific implementation intentions are more likely to result in application. With that, I want to thank everybody for joining. Before you run, I just want to share this link with you. If you're interested in a demo of Hone, please go to that link. You could see much more about us and how we operationalize a lot of the engagement tips that we shared today. Another thing we'd love for you to do is you can just take your phones out and scan this QR code, or you can just go to this link, which will drop into the chat. I think maybe Victoria did it. So the link that Victoria shared, or you can use that QR code. Please give us some feedback, especially stuff that you wish was in today's session, or a way that we should have covered things that we didn't. Any feedback is great. And then you can also indicate any further interest in Hone at the end of that as well.